Gaius Julius Caesar was born in July 100 BC, 100 before Christ. The family name Caesar might have come from one of his ancestors who had been born through a Caesarean section, a C-section, where they cut the baby out of the mother. Caesar probably meant to cut. Caesarean Caesar. And though Julius himself was not cut from the womb, he would do quite a bit of slicing in his own time. Julius grew up, he joined the army, he had a brilliant career, he quickly got success and got one of the most prestigious awards in the entire army, the Civic Crown. And he became famous throughout the Roman Empire. One time, while he was at sea, Julius Caesar was kidnapped by pirates and he was held for a ransom. And the pirates said they were going to ask for a ransom of 20 pieces of silver, and Julius laughed and said, "You better make it 50. And when the ransom was given and he was freed and back on shore, Julius got an entire fleet of ships together and he went after the pirates, he caught up to them, and he crucified them. Which is exactly what he told them he was going to do if they let him go. I guess they thought he was joking. Soon after returning from his sea journey, Caesar encountered a statue of Alexander the Great. And he realized with sadness that he was now the same age Alexander was when he had conquered the entire Mediterranean world. By almost anyone's definition, Caesar was already a success. But it wasn't enough for Julius. Not yet. Soon, he took office. He was elected to a bunch of political positions. He acquired a great deal of influence in quite a short amount of time. Eventually, he had enough troops and power to his name that he crossed over the Rubicon River into Italy and invaded Rome for himself, so that he, and he alone, could be dictator over Rome. Rome was previously a republic, a form of democracy, but he replaced the Republic of Rome with a dictatorship, with him at the top. Then he slept with the Egyptian pharaoh Cleopatra and decided to make a year 365 days. So he basically did whatever he felt like doing. At least he did until the year 44 BC. The day was March 15th, or in Latin, the Ides of March. And on the Ides of March, two politicians in Rome, Cassius and Brutus, helped lead an assassination plot against Julius Caesar. Dozens of men with knives surrounded Caesar in the Senate. Julius Caesar, named after a C-section, though he himself was not born through the slashing of a knife, he would die through the stab of a knife. 23 stabs, to be precise. But though Julius died in 44 BC, his last name, Caesar, would live on for quite some time. In his will, he had named a successor as emperor, Augustus. And he actually had legally adopted Augustus. And so when Augustus came to be emperor, he took Caesar's last name and became known as Gaius Augustus Caesar. And every emperor from then on took the last name Caesar until it ceased to be a last name and just became a title. The leader, the president, the emperor, the king, and perhaps even a god. You see, following his death, Julius Caesar was deified, which means they decided to proclaim him a god like Poseidon or Zeus. He became a deity, which meant that his adopted son, Augustus, was now the son of God. And Rome had the beginning of its own Trinity. The Caesars had cut their way to heaven and become gods. And some of them really might have believed it themselves. They were in control of the entire Mediterranean world. They had more power than any other mortal before them. Basically everything in this box, including Britannia or England up there, belonged to Rome, to the empire, to the Caesar. The Caesars often maintained power by maintaining their godlike image. Much like in North Korea, Kim Jong-un maintains power by maintaining his supreme godlike status and spreading myths such as that he never poops. True story. And whenever Rome invaded a city and took over an area, they'd allow the local customs and religions to continue as long as, at the end of the day, if you were willing to bow down and worship Caesar, if you were willing to make sacrifices in the temple to Caesar, to pray to Caesar, then it was okay. And if any word of someone else claiming to be a king or an emperor came up, Rome was quick to shut it down and force people to worship Caesar instead. Much like I will do if anyone tries to become pastor here in my place. Be noted. I do not poop. Madison's like, and so began what is known as the Imperial cult, the worship of the Roman emperor. Here is a temple, it's still there today, that was made to Augustus. And it's called the Temple of the God, Augustus Caesar. See, people began to believe in Rome as a symbol of hope. The Roman dream. Rome was one of the first empires in history to systematically build roads and bring trade and economy and bring stability and comfort to the areas that invaded. The invaded nations grew a sort of Stockholm syndrome where the hostages fell in love with the hostage takers, Rome. All throughout the Roman Empire, they have temples like this one, and statues dedicated to Rome, and people would come and sacrifice animals to the Caesars, and they'd say their prayers to Caesar, and when war and famine came, you would turn to Caesar for help like you once turned to the gods. And this went on for decades. When Julius Caesar was assassinated in BC 44, he was later replaced by Augustus Caesar. And Augustus Caesar ruled the Roman Empire until 14 AD, 14 Anno Domini, 14 in the year of our Lord, 14 years after Christ was born. And when Augustus died, he was replaced by Tiberius Caesar, who reigned on into the AD 30s, which brings us up to date in our story in the book of Acts. In AD 33, Jesus left and left us a mission. His Spirit came to bring it to fruition. Then Peter pissed off the Sanhedrin, so Saul martyred Stephen. But Saul became Paul and went through many trials to bring the gospel to the Gentiles. And that's where we left off last week, with Paul bringing the gospel to the Gentiles in Philippi. And as you can see from the map, Philippi is in the box. Paul is marching through the heart of the Roman Empire, through the belly of the beast. Christianity is rising in the shadow of Caesar. Acts chapter 17. They left Philippi Then they passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia and came to Thessalonica. So back in AD 33, Christianity was down here in Jerusalem, remember? And now it's AD 50 and it's rised up and it's grown, and now it's come all the way through Asia and into Greece, and now it's come to Thessalonica. Thessalonica will later be where Paul sends the letter to the Thessalonians, which is part of our New Testament Bible. Thessalonica, Thessalonians. So if you've read Thessalonians, today you're going to meet the people it was originally written to. They left Philippi, then they passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia and came to Thessalonica, where there was a Jewish synagogue. As was his custom, Paul went into the synagogue, and on 3 Sabbath days he reasoned with them from the Scriptures, explaining and proving that the Messiah had to suffer and rise from the dead. This Jesus I'm proclaiming to you is the Messiah, he said. Some of the Jews were persuaded and joined Paul and Silas, as did a large number of God-fearing Greeks and quite a few prominent women. But others were jealous. So they rounded up some bad characters. One Bible translation I found translated bad characters as worthless bums. But others were jealous, so they rounded up some worthless bums from the marketplace, formed a mob, and started a riot in the city. They rushed to Jason's house in search of Paul and Silas in order to bring them out to the crowd. Jason, the Bible doesn't really say much about this Jason guy, except that he's a Christian in Thessalonica who's apparently letting Paul chill in his house. And as you're about to find out, Jason will be guilty simply by association. They rushed to Jason's house in search of Paul and Silas in order to bring them out to the crowd. But when they did not find them, they dragged Jason and some other believers before the city officials, shouting, "These men who have caused trouble all over the world have now come here. And Jason has welcomed them into his house. They're all defying Caesar's decrees, saying that there's another king, one called Jesus." And when they heard this, the crowd and the city officials were thrown into turmoil. This is the first official accusation against Christians that they worship Jesus instead of Caesar. That we have some other king, some other Lord that we don't just love, but worship above and over and instead of Caesar and the empire and Rome. And in one sense, this charge is completely bogus. They just made up whatever they wanted to. Jesus isn't a king in the sense that he's going to come down with a lot of soldiers and a bunch of guns and grenades and take over the Roman Empire. He's not that kind of king. Remember when Pontius Pilate at Jesus' trial asked, "Are you a king?" Jesus responded, "My kingdom is not of this world." i.e., yes, I'm a king, but not in the way that you say. Not the kind of king Rome is worried about coming with swords and starting a violent revolution. Not that kind of king. But in another sense, this accusation against Christians is spot on. Christians worship Jesus above Caesar. Caesar might be the king of the land, but Jesus is the king of our hearts. While most religions at the time had many, many gods, and were happy to include Caesar as one of them, Christians believe there's only one God. In Christianity, Jesus isn't just one of hundreds of gods. Jesus is the God. In fact, Christians in Rome were often called atheists because they refused to believe in all the other gods. Christians wouldn't go to the emperor's temple. They wouldn't offer sacrifices of animals to Caesar. Their allegiance was to Christ and Christ alone. They're defying Caesar's decrees, saying there's another king, one called Jesus. While everyone else worshipped the comfort and protection and the luxury that Rome provided, Christians refused to be blinded by the illusion of the cultured civilization, refused to worship the emperor. And so Rome saw Christians as a threat and would often threaten or jail or even execute Christians. And Jason's story today is only the beginning. In fact, modern historians have found a letter from this time period between a Roman governor and the Caesar himself concerning how to deal with Christians. Here it is. I interrogated them to see if they were Christians. Those who confessed, I interrogated a second and a third time, threatening them with punishment. Those who persisted, I executed. Those who denied that they were or had been Christians, I set free as long as they prayed to our gods in words dictated by me and offered prayer with incense and wine to the image of Caesar, and then cursed Christ. I've been told that no one who is truly a Christian can be forced to do such things. We don't worship the power of the state. We don't worship kings and queens and emperors, even if that means we lose our very life. We don't worship the comfort and stability of our empire or the economy or the power of whatever country we find ourselves in. We don't worship Canada. We don't worship America, China, or England. Contrary to what some Christians think, we don't worship George Bush or the flag or the North American dream. No one who is truly a Christian can be made to do such things. Caesar Augustus might have been called a son of God, but we worship Christ, the one and only Son of God. Caesar might be a king, but Jesus is the King of kings. Jesus invented the universe and everything in it. Caesar invented a salad. For some of us in modern-day Canada, we might think, well, we don't really worship Caesar. I mean, I don't pray to the president. I don't have pictures of Stephen Harper in my bedroom. Ew. We don't have temples dedicated to the maple leaf or the beaver or to hockey. I mean, though hockey arenas are probably the closest thing we have to the Roman Colosseum. But worship has a much bigger definition than just what do you pray to, or sing songs to, or sacrifice cows on an altar to. What you worship is what you trust, what you raise up on a pedestal, what you believe in, what you sacrifice for, build your life on, devote your time and your money and your energy to. What you worship is what you put your hopes and your dreams in, what you raise up and pursue and follow like a god. Even an atheist can worship in that sense. The poet Ralph Waldo Emerson once said, "A person will worship something, have no doubt about that. We may think our tribute is paid in secret in the dark recesses of our hearts, but it will come out. That which dominates our imaginations and our thoughts will determine our lives and our character. Therefore, it behooves us to be careful what we worship. For what we are worshiping, we will become." Whether it's just a random byproduct of evolution or something intentionally placed within each of us by God, there is something ingrained in human nature that makes us worship. Every culture, though separated by land and time, has worshipped. Whether they worshipped the sun, or the tree with the most amount of leaves, or a big giant rock, or the chief who had the biggest stick. Something within human nature led every civilization, separated by thousands of years and by land and sea, to worship something. And that instinct continues within us today. Even as we got rid of the temples and the statues and the altars, we've replaced them with new objects of our devotion. I mean, if you don't worship God, you'll just worship something else. If you give all your time to the computer, like people used to give all their time to the temple, then the computer has become what you worship. If you put another person on a pedestal and worship them, whether it's Michael Jackson or Julius Caesar or just someone close to you who you've made your everything and become codependent on, they've become your mini God. If you lift up a dream, whether it's success or fame or beauty or love or significance or attention or approval, if you raise it up and make it an ultimate thing, make it what your entire life is striving towards, dedicate your time and your money and your energy to it, it has become your God. And many of these things are good in moderation, but it's when we make them ultimate things that it becomes unhealthy. Anything that you turn into an ultimate thing, anything that we replace God with and make the ultimate source of our devotion and worship becomes our idol, our king, our mini God. In the Roman Empire, the gods were gods of particular things. Cupid was the god of love. Athena was the goddess of knowledge and wisdom. Aphrodite was the goddess of beauty. Today we don't worship Aphrodite anymore, obviously, but we do worship beauty and appearance. In the ancient world, in their temples, they would cut themselves and dedicate their blood on the altar to Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty. We don't do that anymore, that's stupid, but we do let surgeons cut us to make ourselves more beautiful. We don't give money to Zeus, the god of power, with his lightning bolts anymore. But some of us give our entire adult lives to chasing after success and power. We don't worship Cupid anymore, but we do chase from person to person, looking for love in all the wrong places, trying to fill the hole in our heart with another person's approval and attention. We don't sacrifice animals anymore on an altar to Eros, the god of sex. But some of us sacrifice our entire families on an altar so we can indulge in one sexual affair. Indeed, the modern word erotica is literally derived from the god Eros. We don't worship Bacchus, the god of drunkenness and partying anymore, but, well, you know where that one's going. We don't worship Nike, the goddess of victory anymore, but many people worship victory in lots of interesting places, such as sports. In fact, the goddess Nike is literally where they got the sports brand name Nike. And do you know what the slogan of our Vancouver Canucks is? This is what we live for. What we live for. Sports advertising and advertising in general no longer promote a product. Now they promote a world in which we belong and have something to worship and bring us meaning. See, anything can become an idol if we raise it up high enough. Even gardening, cheesecake, movies, video games, hobbies, sleeping, or even something as trivial as sports can become an idol if we worship, if we let these trivial things become ultimate things, if this is what we live for. If you don't worship God, you are just going to worship something else. Whether it's people, celebrities, sports, or sex. Whether it's technology, things, money, comfort, or clothes. Whether it's power, knowledge, status, success, or significance. Whether it's your image, your career, your country, or Gaius Julius Caesar. We all worship something. Don't believe me? Try taking your object of worship away for a little while. Try taking a break from it for a week or a month and see how you respond to its absence. I once heard a story of a guy who didn't think he worshipped sex. He's like, I don't have a porn problem. So we made a deal with him that he wouldn't look at porn for a month, and he gave them his laptop so he couldn't. 2 weeks in, he bought another laptop. You want to know if you worship something? Take it away and see how you handle it. Want to know if you worship your stable country? Spend a couple months in a third world country. Want to know if you worship your phone? Try going without it for a week. Want to know if you worship sports? Try taking a break from it for 2 weeks. Want to know if you worship clothes? Go to work naked. I do it all the time. Aaron, you might not want to sit in that seat. Obviously, I'm joking. Please don't get me fired. Want to know if you worship appearance and beauty? Stand next to Madison and feel small. You want to know if you worship something? Take it away and see how you respond. You might find that when you take these things away, something within you rises up with as much anger as any religious zealot, prepared to kill for your God and to get it back. You might be shocked to find that you are far closer to worshiping the gods and Caesar than you ever thought possible. Of course, we don't literally worship Caesar today. I doubt most of us have ever even been to Rome, let alone worship her. Yet in North America, worship of the state is massive. I mean, in the U.S., worship of Jesus and worship of America are almost synonyms in some places. You can walk into some churches, and up at the front on the stage, they have the cross and the flag right next to each other. And us Canadians who pride ourselves on not being American, we're not always that much better. We might not worship the maple leaf or pray to the beaver, but we're closer to the Roman Empire than we'd like to think. Rome built roads, provided a stable economy and protection, and in some small measure, luxury. Caesar was the god and promise of progressive, futuristic civilization. In the same way, Canada gives us quite a nice life, doesn't it? I mean, we live in one of the most beautiful, stable, comfortable, wealthy places in the world, and it's very easy for me to forget about Christ and just get lost in the dream of Vancouver, lost in the easy chair that is our country. It's so easy to stop worshiping Jesus and start worshiping the comfort of my country, the stability of my state, the privilege of my people. I mean, so much so that if I had to choose between them, if 50 years from now Canada was a totally different place and the government forced me to pick between my faith and my country like Jason in Acts 17, I don't totally know what I'd pick. I mean, if God told me to go be a missionary in a third world country that had none of the stability and comfort I worship in Canada, would I go? Would I pick Christ or comfort? Christ or country? Christ or Canada? Christ or the empire? Christ or Caesar? We grow so used to the blessings of our modern empire here today. We learn to love and worship the comfort we have here today, that when any part of that perfect picture is broken, when we lose our job or the economy tanks, we fall apart with it. Because at the center of our hearts was not Christ, but the comfort of our empire. What was holding us up was not Jesus Christ, but Julius Caesar. We're a lot more like the Roman Empire than we think. And the situation Jason faces in AD 50 is shockingly close to the decision we all face today in AD 2015. I mean, Jason might be making the decision from the electric chair, but we're facing the same underlying questions sitting in our comfy chair. What will we worship? Who will I worship? You will worship something, make no doubt about that. The question is, what will the object of your worship be? What will you make your king that you follow and love and serve and sacrifice for and give yourself to? Who will be your God? What will you worship? What happened with Acts 17? How does the story in Thessalonica end? Acts 17. They, those worthless bums, they dragged Jason and some other believers before the city officials, shouting, "These men who've caused trouble all over the world have now come here, and Jason has welcomed them into his house." They're all defying Caesar's decrees, saying that there's another king, one called Jesus. When they heard this, the crowd and the city officials were thrown into turmoil. Then they made Jason and the others post bond and let them go. And that's the last we hear of Jason. He post bond, but we don't find out what happens when he has to go back for the trial. Did they kill him? Or did he pray to Caesar, curse Jesus, and go free? What happens? It's like the end of a movie where they leave part of the plot hanging. You walk out frustrated because not all your questions got answered. One of the hints we might have, though, is in the book of 1 Thessalonians, when years later Paul writes a letter back to the people in Thessalonica. In 1 Thessalonians 1, Paul says, "You became Christians despite severe suffering." Perhaps he is referring to what eventually happened to Jason. We don't know. Perhaps one day, when you die, you can go ask Jason yourself. As soon as it was night, the believers sent Paul and Silas away to Berea. They're sneaking them out quickly before anything gets too crazy there. On arriving there, they went to the Jewish synagogue. Now, the Berean Jews were of more noble character than those in Thessalonica, for they received the message with a great eagerness and examined the scriptures every day to see if what Paul said was true. And as a result, many of them believed, as did also a number of prominent Greek women and many Greek men. But when the Jews in Thessalonica learned that Paul was preaching the word of God at Berea, some of them went there too, agitating the crowds and stirring them up. The believers immediately sent Paul to the coast to get away from the craziness, but Silas and Timothy stayed at Berea. Those who escorted Paul brought him to Athens. Athens is named after the Greek goddess Athena. Athens, Athena. Athena was the goddess of wisdom, knowledge, art, and mathematics. And the town was rightly named, for Athens was the center of learning in the ancient world. Athens was the Oxford or Harvard or Yale of its day, where all the best and brightest people went, chasing after Athena, chasing after the goddess of knowledge. Athens represented the pinnacle of human reason, the epitome of intellect, the god of the grades, the king of the cognitive, the worship of wit, the Mecca of the mind. And in the next stage of AD history, Paul is going to march to Athens. Faith and doubt are going to duke it out. Christ is going to face off against Athena. Religion and reason are going to war. See you next week.